wonder would be in attendance.
The Institute for Security Studies is skeptical about SANDF intervention in the DRC. Yesterday, the SANDF confirmed that it suffered its first casualties as part of the Southern African Development Community mission. South Africa has deployed nearly 3,000 members to fight armed groups in the eastern DRC. Now, joining us is Piers, Pigou, head of the Southern Africa program for the Institute for Security Studies in South Africa. Piers, thank you so much for your time and for joining us this afternoon. How would you assess South Africa's readiness and preparedness to contribute troops to the DRC? Were there any limitations or challenges that South Africa should have predicted in deploying soldiers to that region?
Well, South Africa has considerable experience in the DRC, having been deployed as part of the Force Intervention Brigade, which fell under MONUSCO in 2013, where for the first time a UN mission had an enforcement mandate, which allowed the South African forces and those from Tanzania and Malawi that joined and were part of the FIB to, at that time, go after the M23, the very same group that fired that mortar at the base on Valentine's Day, with those disastrous consequences. So South Africa is not unfamiliar with the terrain. I think that's the most important thing. The deployment, we do not know actually at this stage how many have been deployed. We know the President has authorized up to 2,900 members of the SANDF to be deployed into a setting where up to 5,000 SADC troops will be deployed from the three key FIB states, again, South Africa, Tanzania, and Malawi. As far as we're aware, there are Tanzanians in situ. The Malawian contingent, as far as we're aware, is not yet.
Conversation with Piers, Pigou, the head of Southern Africa Program Institute for Security Studies. Piers, thank you so much for returning to speak to us. Now, as you were mentioning, we don't know exactly how many have been deployed, but you were still explaining with regards to the readiness of this particular mission.
Yes, I mean, as you know, we've also been deployed for the last 2.5 years with over 1,000 troops as part of the Salmon mission in northern Mozambique. And there is a serious question to be asked about whether the SANDF has capacity to run with two missions. We see the talk of a drawdown from Mozambique, even though the context from a security perspective is not particularly stable at the moment. And there are many people who believe that that will be a premature drawdown in the circumstances. But the needs for resources have now switched to the DRC theatre of operations. And our concern is that the troops are being deployed without adequate equipment, particularly in terms of air cover, but also with concerns about logistical supplies and the ability of our forces to be able to, in conjunction with Tanzanians and Malawians, to be able to take on not only the M23 but other armed formations. There are over 120 non-state armed formations in the Eastern Congo. It's an extremely complex situation. And in the instance of the M23, who they defeated in 2013 and drove back out of the Congo, the M23 is back with serious backing, is very well armed and equipped, and the SANDF no longer have their attack helicopters that they did in 2013 to assist them. So it's a very different equation this time around.
And I think that was my next question to you in terms of that capacity. I mean, to what extent does South Africa's capacity align with the needs and requirements of the DRC, especially now that the M23 have come out even more stronger?
Yeah, I think this is the biggest concern that analysts are talking about. And I mean, you just take the example of the transport helicopters that are available, since we don't have helicopter gunships. You know, we have 3 Oryx helicopters that are available in that environment, and it's simply not enough. I mean, one of them was hit, and we had casualties last week. So, you know, that one will be out of service for a while. So they're operating on a very thin budget with thin capacity, and I think that this is dangerous and in many ways some might argue irresponsible. it does also reflect, in some respects, a kind of over-ambitious sense of capacity from within the SANDF to be able to achieve something in an extremely complex environment that has been in conflict for the last 25 years or so.
I mean, Piers, the SANDF is leading in this mission, but of course it's a joint collaborative mission with the South African Development Community Mission. Are there no resources amongst all these other countries that are collaborating that could assist in ensuring the success of this mission?
Well, there may well be resources that, in theory, could be available from other countries that could contribute. We saw in Salmon that there were contributions, for example, the Mozambique mission from Lesotho, who put over 100 men into the field, from Botswana, who put several hundred combatants into the field. There are certainly, countries like Angola have a very large army, but whether they have the resources or indeed the political will to join this mission remains to be seen. The DRC has been a site of contestation within SADC before, and now we're faced with a peculiar situation where in Mozambique, we have been ostensibly, the South Africans and Salmon and SADC, on the same side as Rwanda, helping Mozambique fight insurgents. Yet now we're in the Congo, where Rwanda is identified as being behind one of the key enemies, one of the key targets of the SADC mission. So it's a pretty complex situation that is unfolding here. So what Naledi Pandor is talking about in terms of this meeting tonight will be extremely interesting to see what's put on the table and whether there's some possibility of pulling these different groups back from the brink, because right now it looks as though this is going to intensify, and this could be extremely dangerous for the SAMI DRC mission.
All right. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. That's Piers Pigou of the Institute for Security Studies in South Africa, speaking to us there about the capacity of the South African National Defence Force in their mission in the DRC.